Gender dysphoria is a state of being or a condition where a person doesn't identify with the gender that you're assigned at birth. The dysphoria part refers to the discomfort, the pain, the anguish that they go through daily in this body that they were assigned to at birth.
Very good question. I think I first had questions about my identity, about my gender, pretty early on.
I feel like I felt very dysphoric since young.
When I was maybe like 3 or so, I was just running around the house and just being a kid. And then my dad, who's just this like Malay man, very traditional, just like wears like the kain sarong at home, and doesn't have a shirt on.
When I was really young, I noticed that my cousins and my relatives were getting toys that I thought were cooler, and they were guys. So there's this one memory in my head where my grandmother bought us all like toys and gifts, and I was just like wondering to myself, like, oh my god, where do they get all the cool stuff? And then she gave me this like doll.
I think looking back from where I am right now, right? I've always been more comfortable with my female friends. I've always been more comfortable, playing their games and engaging in the topics that they discuss, as opposed to the typical boys thing to do, right? Like playing soccer and wrestling in the mud and all that.
So I decided, okay, why don't I do the same thing, right? I just took off my shirt and I just wandered around the house, and my mom took my shirt and was just like, no, you can't do that. That that's not what girls do. You're a girl. And then I was just like, wait, what?
And then I remember her telling me that, oh, it's because you're a girl and girls like this, so you should be liking it as well. And in my head, I was like, oh shit, fuck.
But back then, like in primary school, kindergarten, I did not have the language, right? I did not know why I prefer one thing over the other. And again, growing up in an Asian society, it's pretty much ended up with me thinking that I'm just a little bit strange, right? A little bit different.
And once puberty hit, that was just the worst time. I was just like, oh man, like what's happening in my body? This is like, and then when the period started, it was all like, oh, like this is for real. This is like for freaking real. This is happening. So it was just like, oh damn, this is not the puberty I wanted.
And that's when I figured out that, hey, you know what? Maybe, right? Maybe something really is different, right? And that's when I started going into, the beautiful world of the internet and trying to figure out and read up about what this is. Now, unfortunately, of course, the only representations of trans people back then were very negative, stereotypical, images, right? And again, I tried to sweep it under the carpet, pretended that nothing is wrong.
But I tried to just play it off as like, oh, like, yeah, periods, like, boobs and stuff. But I was not happy at all, yeah.
So, gender dysphoria can be managed, or a lot of people manage them before professional help. I think that's the typical journey for someone experiencing gender dysphoria. A lot of it is an internal struggle with them trying to understand who they are as a person. The challenges that come with that, there are not that many resources that are accessible to them, be it through media or the internet or through publications. There just isn't a lot of information, and so it can be a struggle trying to find information to first of all try to identify the feelings that they're having, and secondly how to manage the feelings that they're having. So social transitioning refers to someone with dysphoria doing things that will make them comfortable in public or even in private. So these could range from things like asking their friends to refer to them by their preferred name, pronouns, wearing things like makeup, wearing different types of clothes that might align better with the gender that they identify with. So making changes in the environment or to the way they present themselves to make it easier to get through the day with the dysphoria.
I transitioned at the age of 28, so pretty late on. I just figured out, entering my 30s, I didn't want to continue, just living someone else's life, essentially.
The older I got, I guess I was discovering myself, and I figured I feel most comfortable presenting more masculine. And I think when people see you dressing more masculine, they assume that you want to take hormones or be seen as a cis man. But then in my head, I was like, that's not what I resonate with.
I just figured out that, I'm not really happy. I'm not miserable, but I'm not happy, right? And if, going down this entire path of transition has the potential, right, to make me feel better, make me happier than I was, then yeah, I think it's worth giving it a try.
When I went to London and then I started hanging out with the queer community, then I realized that, okay, they, them is an option. And I guess it was when I met my partner that I realized that, okay, people are not questioning like, why are you using they, them? When I tell someone like, I'm non-binary, they're just like quick to accept it very quickly, as compared to, I think in Singapore, people tend to be a little bit more binary, where they're like, oh, but why? Like, what does that mean? No, you should choose one. Or like, oh, because you're masculine, you should be a guy or a man.
A lot of people should really try to listen to what actually gives them gender euphoria instead of like, okay, instead of dysphoria, like lean more towards like, okay, what makes you feel comfortable, what makes you feel like you. And for me, that was being referred to as he, him, yeah. And after I realized that, I remember one of my friends actually said this to me, which was, I feel like it was a bit of a pivotal thing that really like stuck on my head. And she said like, it's okay if you want to transition, you can do that if you want, that, right?
Work was actually one of the first circles where I fully came out, where I started presenting as my, in my true identity as a female. Again, like I said, I was lucky enough that my colleagues, my managers were mostly supportive, and I haven't had much issues there. But yeah, for the first year or two, when I started my coming out, I started presenting femininely. That's where it was, right? I would come in a shirt and pants, and then change out in the office into something that was I felt a bit more comfortable in. And then after that, before I head out, change back into my my male persona to meet my friends, the rest of my family, and so on.
And one of the first things I did was just search up Dr. Soy. Because after doing my research on local information on transitioning in Singapore, so I just called up a doctor and be like, hi, I'd like to book an appointment. I said, I remember this day, it was I think I was almost yelling. I was just so nervous. I'm like, hi, I'd like to book an appointment. I
went to, actually see a psychologist, speak about these issues, and that's when I figured out that, yeah, you know what? Maybe it's not that I wasn't happy. It's more that, I've numbed myself to certain things, right? That I feel like I'm not miserable because I've turned off that switch, right? I didn't allow myself to really feel the emotions that I experience, or all this, different, I don't know what you would call them, desires.
It sucks when my friends, especially my closer group of friends, find it very difficult to adjust, even when the first time when I told people that, I go by Ru, professional and socially. This was years ago. I think a lot of people took it as a joke. A lot of people didn't really understand and thought why are you changing a name? Or some people would be like, oh yeah, your dead name is not that feminine anyway. These kind of situations. Or I have a few close friends who refuse to call me by Ru, but instead insist that it's not an issue if they call me by my dead name. And they just always tell me why are you making such a big deal out of it? I mean, as of now, I've drawn some distance, but I think back then I didn't want to let them go as friends. And I thought there's this huge sense of shit, like, am I doing something wrong? Like, is it my fault? Like, am I complicating things?
There are, of course, moments when I get on calls with my clients, for example, and some of these I've only met once, or during my first call with them, and they see me and then they start hearing me speak. And one of my clients actually called in their colleagues and started pointing at my screen, and before the mic was muted, right, I could clearly hear someone asking, it's like, what the hell is that?
The diagnosis of gender dysphoria is quite clear in the medical community. I think there's also a question of whether it needs to be diagnosed and the pathologization of the diagnosis as well. But essentially, to get the services you need to be comfortable in the body that you want to be in, gender dysphoria is typically diagnosed by a psychiatrist. And then the services that come afterwards tends to be a multidisciplinary kind of system, depending on the needs of the patient, be it if they're interested in hormones or surgery or other procedures as well. So it tends to be multidisciplinary after the diagnosis is made by a psychiatrist.
It's not that I wasn't happy. It's more that I've numbed myself to certain things, right? That I feel like I'm not miserable because I've turned off that switch, right? I didn't allow myself to really feel.
When I was out in my workplace, I felt normal. I felt liberated. Because I think for the longest time, I always thought that after I graduated, I felt very scared that as a queer person looking more masculine, I wasn't going to get a job. I was very, very scared because I think my parents also told me like, oh, by the way, you're going to find your first job, you need to wear a skirt, you need to, fit, like you have to do all these things in order to be accepted.
My older sister was like honestly one of my closest allies, and I came into her and I was just like, hey, I think I might be transgender. And then she was like, all right, okay. And then like, well, think about it. And then, we can have a little chat about it. It's all good. And I didn't know this at the time, but she actually reached out to someone in the community, and she was just like, okay, so my sister thinks she might be trans, like what do I do, sort of thing. And it was just like, when I found out about it, I was just like, that was just like one of the, like, it really touched my heart. It was just like this big, like, act of allyship that one of the first, I would say, in like the journey becoming like, accepting the trans label for myself and stuff like that.
So I think the one point that made me realize, right, that I am doing the right thing was actually after taking my first dose of hormone replacement therapy, right? And it's strange to think about how much like that tiny little pill could do, but I took like one or two pills, I can't remember, but within the first week, right, I started feeling different. I don't know whether it's a placebo effect, whether it's actually doing something, but I felt something, right? And as I continued that, that's when I realized that I am experiencing a wider range of emotions. I feel more connected with who I am.
Like in my day-to-day, thank God, I post top surgery and everything, I just kind of look like a really chunky dude. So like a chunky dude with fat ass. So people are just like, oh, it's kind of thick. But other than that, people don't really look at me like twice. Yeah. So I guess I'm like kind of grateful for that.
In Singapore, I felt very accepted by one of my job places, essentially 99 Co. They were very open, even though back then I had not changed my official name on my IC yet. They didn't ask any questions. They asked like, oh, is this the name you prefer? I say yes. And they set up everything else for me. And I see how like my marketing team puts in a lot of effort to make sure like when we're talking to external clients or anyone, they use my right pronouns. My COO, Yen, he also takes a lot of initiative to tell anyone who's joining the team like, hey, just a heads up, you're working with someone who's non-binary, their name is Ru, they go by they, them. And he was actually the first one to message me when Slack had a whole pronoun feature, which I thought was very, very cute.
There is no legal sense to it. There's no social sense. There's no, if you want to bring religion into this, right? It goes against everything that I, believed in or that I was taught. But like I mentioned, right, the feelings kept coming. And when I started taking HRT, it still does not make sense. But I think at the back of my mind, something clicked, right? I don't know how to put it into words, but yeah, it changed, right? My outlook, so-called, in life changed, right? The skies are bluer, the birds are chirping, whatever you name it. That's how I felt.
One thing that surprised me, and I think a lot of people who, a lot of closeted trans people, I remained closeted for a bit. I mean, a few years actually, because I was afraid that, if I transition, I'm like, who's gonna like be with me? Who's gonna love me? Sort of thing. Like, no one wants to be with me, sort of thing. And it's just like this whole like thing of like self-hatred and, society just saying like, people who transition, they like, they're just gonna be ugly and like, all these things. And I'm just like, there's so much fear mongering there. And yeah, true. I mean, like if you like go on TV, there's a chance you might lose your hair, but that honestly depends on your genes and how good like your general health is. So it's not like a be all and end all. So I mean, my hair was already thin to begin with, so it's only natural. But yeah, the one thing that surprised me is that like I think I've gone on more dates after transitioning than before. So that's a net positive, I feel.
So my first experience with a trans patient was when I was a house officer. So that means I was in my first year of being a doctor. Inclusive healthcare was something I've been working on for some time, but it was something that I worked on like on paper and something that I talked about. But it was my first experience as a doctor actually meeting a trans patient and actually having to grapple with that situation. So it was an interesting situation where this person was presenting as a female, but their gender marker was still male. And so in hospitals, unfortunately, people are segregated based on that into not just where they sleep, but by the clothes that they have to wear as well. And there were some uncomfortable things being talked about this patient. And being a very young doctor at that time, I had this internal struggle where I don't know whether I should speak up for the patient or I should just keep quiet and just lay low. And after a while, I decided to speak up and say that I've talked to this patient. This is how they like to be addressed. These are their pronouns, and I think we should call them by how they prefer to be called. We can say so many things about we should call people by their IC name and all this kind of things, but ultimately we're there to make the patient's experience comfortable. And if this makes their experience comfortable, why would you not want to do that? And often enough, there are simple solutions around things like clothes you wear in the hospital. You can just wear your own t-shirt, A way around the sleeping situation is that we can see if we can find like a single room that we can accommodate the patient in, which is eventually what we did for this patient to make them feel a bit more comfortable. But it took a bit of effort. And a bit of talking with other people. But it was something that I was proud that I did as a very young doctor. And I think that's kind of set the tone of how I advocate for my patients now. Because ultimately, our job as doctors is to make our patients feel comfortable. And we should try our best to do that.
My one advice to whoever, right, my younger self or whoever is going through this, is to do this. Do everything that you think is necessary for yourself. Right? And what I mean by that is to not compare where you are with where other people are right now. Because again, everyone's situations are different. Some may be more privileged than others. Some may have the protection of their friends, their community, and the support that they need, some don't. So take care of yourself first, right? Whether or not that eventually leads you to be able to transition, or whether or not that remains a question, right, that you still have to answer, I think that's, as long as you do those steps and ask yourself these questions about what matters most to you and what your priorities are, I think then you would have the answers, right, as to whether or not you should do one thing or the other.
It's gonna be okay. You don't have to figure everything out right now. It might take time, but I promise you, with patience, you will slowly figure it out. And even though along the way or growing up, you might feel like there's a lot of roadblocks in terms of where you want to be, and people telling you otherwise in terms of like what you believe in. But if you just keep going, things will just fall into place.
Can I look in the camera? Okay, just like, hey, all right, I don't know like which journey you want, like finding out your identity and stuff, but you have to remember that there's always a way forward. There's always a way forward. Even if you think you're stuck right now, if you think there's no escape from whatever you're going through now, you will go through it and you will come out so much stronger, possibly weirder, but you will make through it, okay? You have all the help in the world. You have you've got friends, you've got family, you've got people who love you. People out there are literally strangers out there who really want to see you thrive and survive this. Okay, you got this. You got this. You're wonderful. You're brilliant. You're strong. You're beautiful. You're amazing. You're powerful. You're so smart. You're gonna get through this. 100%.
The conversation about gender diverse people being confused is an interesting one, and something that's easily answered if you just talk to trans individuals, right? I think when you talk to trans individuals, this dysphoria is something that's innate and something that they experience in varying degrees, from the time they can articulate kind of like their opinions or their thoughts. And these feelings, they are good at hiding them, but they will know they have these feelings since they are young. It's so much easier living a cisgender life. Nobody chooses to be trans, It's a much more difficult life. We have a lot more challenges. We have to pay a lot more money, a lot more things to be scared of. We don't choose to be trans, it's a much more difficult life. And so when we do make that decision that we are going to accept who we are, our gender identity, and we are going to be comfortable with who we are, I think something to be respected, right? And something to be proud of. Because you're taking on the world, essentially. But people aren't confused. It's not a confused journey. When people decide to come out as trans, it is not they just snap their fingers and thought about it. It is years of internal turmoil and struggles.
If I could say one thing to the Singaporeans, or to society in general, it's that this is not a choice, right? We don't choose to be trans, to undergo all these difficult experiences just because it sounds like fun. We do this because often we don't have a choice, right? For example, when I went through my gender-affirming surgery, and living through the aftercare and the recovery of that, I understood, right, that really this was not a laughing matter, right? It's not a choice that I take lightly, and it's a choice that I have, and other people in the community, most of them at least, have spent years thinking about it, right? Because the pain and the just sheer judgment and trouble that you go through to reach that stage, right? right? Nobody would do that just to gain access to the women's bathroom, for example, right? People only go through these things that are almost impossible sometimes because they think it's worth it, right? Or because they have nothing else to lose. Right? So don't, downplay that. Don't think that this is a laughing matter. It is a serious issue that impacts the lives of easily thousands of people, many of them youth who are in need of support from the rest of the community and, of course, society in general.
Hi, we exist. And like we walk among you, like literally, we might be your neighbors, we might be your boss, your colleague. We're all over the place. We're not like, I don't know, freaks on the internet or like, weirdos that are trying to, groom children. It's not true that we're trying to do surgery on kids. That's literally like not what we do. Like transitioning for children is literally being like, all right, this kid wants to go by this name and call them they them or she her or he him.
To anyone who says that trans individuals or non-binary individuals are confused, I want to say that you're wrong, but I know that I shouldn't say that they're wrong. But I just want to say keep an open mind. And if I were to throw the question back at you, for instance, you being straight, would you, what if I question you, like if like you liking whoever that you like is wrong, how would you feel about that? I think you need to keep an open mind in terms of how people are just expressing themselves, just like how you are expressing yourself as well.